Hello, crypto world. Welcome to the Chart Historian. My name is Justin, and on this channel, I delve deep into crypto charts, exploring chart structures, fractals, and patterns. In this video, I'm going to talk about XRP, what has progressed since my last video, and what I believe is about to happen. Folks, I have an exciting video. Now, by the time you watch this video, things may look very different on this chart. This is recorded Thursday evening. By the time you watch it, it's going to be Friday, and this chart may look different. So XRP has been following a structure from its macro repetitive structure. That is a fractal taken from that macro repetitive structure. So for those of you who are new and never heard of this, let me show you what I'm talking about. So this is that repetitive macro structure. The reason why it's important for you to understand what this is before we dive into what is taking place on today's chart is you'll understand the bigger picture, and this is central. This is key to all of my technical analysis. So XRP has a repetitive macro structure. In that structure, it includes bull runs, it includes declines, and it includes sideways range-bound times. This structure repeats over and over again. It plays out on large scale. It also plays out on small scale. So here we see a bull run, a decline, and a sideways range-bound time. If we went further back in time, it would be the same sequence of events. Bull runs, declines, sideways range-bound time. Here's another one, bull run, decline, and we're almost complete this sideways range-bound time. This sideways range-bound time is a part of the chart that loses many analysts, and it just seems random, it seems chaotic, but folks, it is not. So to show you that it's not, I break it into three separate fractals. Now, I'm going to describe the functions of these fractals. I'm not going to say this fractal looked similar to this fractal back in the day, and we're going to use it as a guide. That is not the core of my analysis. So it is my belief that XRP has a repetitive macro structure. Each one of these fractals within that macro structure has a certain set of defined functions. So I am going to examine the fractal based off of its functions. Those functions are predictable. They repeat, but they look different every single time. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So over here in fractal 1, we have two parts to it. There's part A, where price moves up, moves back down, and then part B, where it goes flat. We see that same set of functions repeated over here in this fractal 1. So price moves up and down in part A, and then in part B, it went flat. Fractal 2 has three waves, wave A, wave B, and wave C. We see that once again play out over here, wave A, wave B, and wave C. It looks different, but the functions are there. In fractal 3, it moves up to a peak, which is part A. It then declines or crashes, which is part B. It then recovers from that crash, does a smaller correction, and then it goes into the bull run. So over here in fractal 3, we moved up to a peak, which is part A. It then declined, which is part B. It then recovered, and we are now in this small correction. So do you see how I showed you a set of functions and how those functions repeated once again? If we went further back in time, we would see the same set of functions play out. However, every single time it looks different. This fractal 3 looks different from this fractal 3. Now, one fractal 3 to another fractal 3 has a lot of commonalities. Why do they do that? Well, the primary thing is that they're repeating the same functions. So all fractal 3s will move up to part A. All fractal 3s will decline into part B. All fractal 3s will recover from that low, and then, or this low. Sometimes it's not the low, like this is actually lower. Over here, it is the low. So after that crash, it recovers, and then does that bull run. All of them have these functions, but as you can see, it looks different. So what I'm going to do to help track our progress through this fractal, I'm going to compare this recovery and smaller correction to this recovery and smaller correction. So I'll copy and paste this over here. Let's see what it looks like. Okay, so here we are on a 1 hour candle. I have copied and pasted that fractal. So here is the low, part B. It then recovers from that low and goes into the smaller correction. In my last video, I thought that it was playing out like this, or potentially a smaller version like this. Well, I'm going to present the case that I believe it's playing out at this scale, at least this part here. However, this part, it is my belief, has played out on a much smaller time frame. And this is something important to understand about fractals. So when a fractal repeats, the basic concept repeats, but the timing, the height, and the depth, all those are going to be original to the new iteration. So it can allow for novelty in a fractal. It can allow for a fractal to play out much larger or smaller, or parts of a fractal to play out larger or parts to play out smaller. So let's zoom into this part right here on a small time frame. Okay, so here we are on a 15-minute candle, and this is that same recovery that we were talking about. So as you can see, it has followed the basic idea. Now, some parts have varied from what this original structure did. For instance, here it moves up. However, on today's chart, it was just a sudden move up. This brings up an interesting point. So many people have had the belief that the lawsuit conclusion from the SEC versus Ripple was going to be the catalyst that catapulted XRP into the bull run. Well, as you can see, it wasn't quite the catapult that many thought it would be. In fact, if we were to go over here to this fractal 2, this drastic move up, that was the move up that resulted from the ruling. When this took place, I was telling everyone, I'm a small channel, so it's not like I have a huge audience. I was telling everyone who would listen, put it that way, that this was not a bull run. Many big analysts were saying that this could potentially be a bull run. I was saying that it's going to turn around and come back down, and the reason why was because this was the C wave of fractal 2. It's a wave. It moves up, it comes back down, and sometimes it even goes lower. Anyways, so this move up really just distorted this structure. It exaggerated it. So the lawsuit doesn't change the macro structure. The macro structure is stronger than the lawsuit. So this little move that resulted from the conclusion of that lawsuit, in my opinion, made sense. It didn't even really exaggerate it much. Where it did change it, it didn't drop as steep as it did originally. But other than that, it's already kind of snapped in line and is following. Now, it could differ from what this fractal does. That is a possibility, as every time this structure repeats, it's going to look original. I'd like to see price get above this high. That is the high before the decline. Once I believe it gets above this, it's really going to take off. So, folks, as you can see, we are mighty, mighty close. This is the end of the sideways range-bound time. Folks, after the sideways range-bound time comes the bull run. We are at the door, the threshold of the bull run. This is exciting. I can't underscore it enough. This is the point where the chart changes and starts moving up. I hope this is my last sideways range-bound time video I'm going to make. I've been making them for years. I'm tired of making them, but we'll see how that plays out. Now, there's also the other fractal that I was showing you in my last video. That is this fractal from 2016 and the very beginning of 2017. So this is another third range-bound fractal. So it moves up to part A, which is the peak. It then declines or crashes, which is part B. It then recovers, does a smaller correction, and then it goes into the bull run. If we were to copy this fractal and compare it to today's third range-bound fractal, it would look something like this. So as you can see, there are similarities. It has this flat part, which we see on the fractal. It then moves up to a peak, which it did on today's chart and on the fractal. It then declines, moves up to the second peak. It then declines into part B. After that, it sort of does its own thing, today's chart. So let's zoom in. So on today's chart, it moved up quite high, but it still echoed this. This has recovered, and in the fractal from 2016-17, it moves up, does a smaller correction. Well, we have that smaller correction, this smaller correction actually playing out here. If we were to copy this part of the structure and paste it on this part of the chart on a smaller time frame, it would look something like this. So while there is some deviation right here, and this is representative of all of this. So it was much larger on today's chart, but it does echo this fractal. So here are both of them. I'm going to change the color on this 2016/17 one, so that's green. So as you can see, they both kind of tell a similar story. In the chart, it's repeating that similar story as well. Okay, so I removed that other fractal. So as you can see, folks, once again, by the time you see this video, it may already be well into the bull run. Let's talk about the bull run. This bull run is going to follow a repetitive structure. So XRP has repetitive bull runs. The structures repeat. There are several corrections within this bull run. They have repetitive functions that each of these corrections do. I have made a series of videos on my Patreon, and it dives into this repetitive structure of the XRP bull run. If you want to get ahead of the game and know what is coming down the pike, I highly recommend this. This is a series of, I think, 4 or 5 videos. It's a $5 a month subscription, and the main thing is not this. It's actually the Discord that's connected to my Patreon. In there, we discuss XRP, we discuss Casper. As you can see, I also have the Casper bull run structure. For any of you that have Casper, I'll put the link to my Patreon in the description of this video. Well, folks, I'll wrap this video up. It's been a long journey getting through this sideways range-bound time. I started my channel at the very beginning of this sideways range-bound time. I have gotten lost at different points on small time frames, but on the large time frame, this macro structure has been spot on. It's something unique. You're not going to find this type of technical analysis anywhere else. This is not normal fractal analysis. This goes much deeper. Because I study the functions of the fractals, I'm able to predict what future movement will be. I can't predict the timing. I can't predict the height or the depth of things, but I can predict what comes next as far as the bigger structure goes. Folks, if you found this video interesting, it'd be much appreciated if you hit that thumbs up button. If you're not a subscriber yet, I recommend hitting that subscribe button. I'll continue to follow up on this chart. This is not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. Folks, this bull run has the potential to improve people's lives for the better, but understand the bigger macro picture, in the US at least, that we are headed into some challenging economic times. I have a playlist where you can deep dive into the way I see this coming economic hurricane. That's what I'm calling it. How I believe aspects of it will play out. Here's a link to that playlist. I'm so glad you caught this video. I hope you catch my next one. Have a great day, and bye for now.